The sun shone brightly over Riverside, a city that, on a summer day, seemed to be in perfect harmony. The Central Park was filled with families and children running and playing under the clear blue sky. Edward Johnson, Riverside's police colonel, was there to enjoy a rare day off with his wife, Sarah, and their daughter, Emily. It was a precious opportunity to spend time with his family without the distractions of work. Edward, a 47-year-old man with an imposing stature and an air of authority, was wearing a casual blue shirt and jeans. Sarah, at 42, was dressed in a floral dress, and Emily, 18, wore a light blouse and shorts. They walked through the park, laughing and chatting as they passed a small fountain where children played. "Dad, don't you think the ice cream from that cart looks even more delicious today?" Emily commented, eyeing the cart in the distance. "Certainly, Emily. I think we can take a break and get some ice cream. What do you think, Sarah?" Edward asked, turning to his wife with a smile. "That sounds like a great idea. I'll get the ice cream while you find us a spot to sit," Sarah replied, giving Edward a light kiss on the cheek before heading toward the cart. Edward and Emily found a bench near the fountain and sat down to enjoy the day. The conversation flowed easily between them, with stories from school and the latest news from town. Suddenly, a commotion began to form in a nearby area of the park. A group of young people started getting into a loud argument, and the situation quickly escalated into a full-blown brawl. Edward, though off-duty, watched with concern. "Dad, look at that. It seems like things are getting out of hand over there," Emily pointed out. "Let's stay away and wait for things to calm down," Edward replied, trying to stay calm. On the other side of the park, James Brown, a newly transferred police officer to Riverside, was on patrol and spotted the disturbance. Without hesitation, he moved in to intervene. Brown was a 50-year-old man of average height with a firm demeanor. He approached with authority, trying to control the situation. "Everyone, stop immediately. Step back and calm down," Brown ordered, his voice ringing clearly through the chaos. As he tried to separate those involved, the confusion began to spread. The situation was getting out of control, and some of the young people started reacting aggressively. Brown, determined to restore order, began arresting those most involved. The pressure of the situation made him act quickly, and he failed to realize who was actually present at the scene. When Edward approached, trying to intervene discreetly, he was shocked to be handcuffed by Brown. "Wait, I'm Colonel Johnson. This is a mistake," Edward exclaimed, his voice filled with frustration. "I'm sorry, sir, but you're obstructing police work. I need you to calm down," Brown replied, not looking directly at Edward. Edward tried to explain, but his attempt was interrupted by the urgency of the situation. Sarah, noticing what was happening, ran back to help. "Please, this is a mistake. My husband is a high-ranking officer." The tension escalated. People around were starting to notice what was happening, and murmurs began to spread through the park. Emily, distressed, watched from a distance, trying to understand what was happening to her father. The chaos in the park had subsided, but the impact of the incident was becoming clearer. James Brown, still on the scene, was trying to manage the situation and ensure that everyone involved was identified and taken to the station. He was so focused on handling the mess that he did not realize the mistake he had made in arresting Edward Johnson. Edward was now at the Riverside Police Station, sitting on one of the plastic chairs in the waiting area, handcuffed and with an expression of frustration mixed with bewilderment. Sarah and Emily stood nearby, nervous and trying to understand what was going on. The tension in the air was palpable, and the police station's environment seemed colder and more distant than usual. Lisa Carter, a 35-year-old detective known for her skill and empathy, arrived at the station after receiving the call about the incident. Upon entering the station, she saw James Brown talking with a group of officers, still trying to handle the aftermath of the park chaos. Lisa approached, her gaze focused and determined. "James, what happened?" Lisa asked, her voice carrying a mix of authority and concern. "Detective Carter, there was a huge disturbance at the park. I arrested one of the people involved, but something doesn't seem right. Apparently, he's a high-ranking officer, but I didn't recognize him," James replied, clearly tense and a bit embarrassed. Lisa's expression turned worried as she decided to head to the waiting area to get a clearer picture of the situation. Upon opening the door and seeing Edward handcuffed, her face showed a mix of surprise and discomfort. "Colonel Johnson? What's going on here?" Lisa asked, trying to keep her tone calm and respectful. Edward looked up, relieved to see someone he knew. "Lisa, this is a huge mistake. I was with my family in the park, and when things started to heat up, I tried to help, but ended up being handcuffed. I don't know why this happened." Lisa frowned, trying to process the situation. "I'll clear this up immediately. James, can you give me all the details about what happened at the park?" James, still visibly nervous, tried to explain. "I arrived and saw the fight. Things were out of control. I identified a few people as the main troublemakers and started arresting them. I didn't realize who Colonel Johnson was until now." "I understand," Lisa replied, her voice serious. "I'll speak with witnesses and review what happened. In the meantime, I'll make sure Colonel Johnson is released from the handcuffs." Lisa headed back to the area where Edward was seated and, with a gesture of respect, began to remove the handcuffs. "I apologize for the inconvenience, Colonel. We'll sort this out as quickly as possible. I hope we can clear everything up." Sarah and Emily approached, relieved to see Edward freed from the handcuffs. "Thank you, Lisa. This has been a nightmare for our family," Sarah said, her voice heavy with relief and concern. "I understand. We'll do everything we can to resolve this and ensure something like this doesn't happen again," Lisa responded, trying to convey a sense of responsibility and reassurance. With Edward now free, Lisa began a preliminary investigation. She spoke with those involved and witnesses, aiming to determine if there had been any protocol errors or misunderstandings. "Colonel, is there anything I can do to make up for the inconvenience?" Lisa asked while reviewing the incident records. "Lisa, the most important thing is to understand what really happened. If something went wrong, it needs to be corrected. I just hope this doesn't affect the trust we have in each other," Edward replied, his tone one of resignation. Lisa nodded, grasping the seriousness of the situation. "Understood. I'll make sure everything is handled with the utmost seriousness." As the investigation progressed, the incident began to leave scars on the community and the relationships within the police force. What had started as a peaceful day now unfolded as a puzzle that needed to be resolved with care and sensitivity. Edward, still processing the events, knew that resolving this incident would require more than just a simple explanation. The trust between him and his colleagues, and between the police and the community, was at stake. The following morning in Riverside brought a tense atmosphere, reflecting the repercussions of the park incident. The police station was bustling with activity, with officers and staff moving swiftly from one place to another. Lisa Carter was in the conference room, reviewing the case details while trying to clarify the situation as quickly as possible. Edward Johnson was in his office, a small room decorated with family photos and certificates of recognition. He was trying to handle the situation and prepare a statement for the press. News of the incident had spread quickly, and by now, Edward's name was all over the local news. Lisa entered Edward's office with a concerned expression. "Colonel, how are you feeling?" Edward looked at Lisa, his expression reflecting the frustration and sadness from the previous day. "Lisa, it's not easy. My family is shaken, and the trust we've built in the community is being tested. What have you found out so far?" Lisa pulled up a chair and sat down, her gaze focused. "I reviewed the recordings and spoke with witnesses. The incident was the result of a series of misunderstandings and, perhaps, a lack of recognition on James's part. He acted based on what he thought was protocol, but without knowing who you were at that moment." Edward sighed, frustration evident in his tone. "So, there's no simple explanation. James should have verified the identity before acting, and that doesn't help my current situation much." "I understand," Lisa said, her tone conciliatory. "I'll speak with James and make sure he understands the importance of verifying all information before acting. But we also need to consider how to handle this publicly. Perception is important." Edward nodded, still visibly unsettled. "Yes, perception is crucial. I don't want this to damage our team's image or cause mistrust between us and the community." As they spoke, James Brown entered Edward's office with an expression of concern and remorse. He seemed to be struggling with the weight of what had happened. "Colonel Johnson, Detective Carter, James began, his voice trembling slightly. I want to apologize for what happened yesterday. I didn't know who you were. I acted based on what I saw and the urgency of the situation. Edward looked at James with a mix of exhaustion and understanding. James, I understand you were trying to do your job, but the truth is, this could have been avoided with more careful identity verification. James lowered his head, acknowledging the mistake. I understand and am ready to face the consequences. I just hope we can resolve this and move forward. Lisa intervened, trying to mediate the situation. James, what's most important now is to learn from what happened and ensure it doesn't happen again. We need to reinforce training on handling similar situations and the importance of verifying identities. Edward agreed with a nod. Yes, and we also need to think about how to communicate this to the community. Transparency is essential to maintaining trust. James nodded. I'm willing to cooperate and do whatever is necessary to fix this. The conversation continued, with the three working together to find a solution. The station's team began preparing a public statement that would explain the situation and the measures being taken to prevent future incidents. Lisa also started reviewing internal procedures to ensure all officers were aware of the importance of verifying identities and strictly following protocols. The impact of the incident was still unfolding, and Edward knew that recovery wouldn't be immediate. However, he also understood that how they handled the situation now could help restore trust and strengthen the team. The journey of recovery and reconciliation had just begun, and the path ahead was filled with challenges and opportunities to learn and grow. The sun was low on the horizon, casting a golden light over Riverside as the day gave way to evening. Edward Johnson was at home, going through documents and trying to manage the fallout from the park incident. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Lisa Carter, calling to inform him about an important meeting. Colonel, can we meet at the station tomorrow morning to go over the final details of the investigation? Lisa asked. Her voice was serious, but there was a note of determination in her words. Of course, Lisa. I'll be there, Edward replied, his voice heavy with fatigue. Thank you for handling this. The next morning, the police station was quieter than in previous days, but the tension was still palpable. Lisa had arranged a meeting with Edward, James Brown, and other team members to discuss the findings of the investigation. Edward arrived at the station and was greeted by Lisa, who was ready for the meeting. She led him to the conference room, where James Brown was already present, looking worried and tense. Good morning, Colonel, James said, standing to greet Edward. Thank you for coming. Good morning, James. Let's see what we have, Edward replied, taking a seat around the conference table. Lisa started the meeting, her voice clear and direct. Thank you all for being here. Our goal today is to review what we've found so far and discuss the next steps. James, I'd like you to start by explaining what happened from your perspective. James took a deep breath and began to speak. I arrived at the park and saw a group of young people involved in a fight. In the confusion, I identified a few individuals as the main troublemakers and began to make arrests. Unfortunately, I didn't realize Colonel Johnson was among them. I acted based on what I saw and what I thought was protocol. I understand, Edward said, his expression showing a mix of understanding and frustration. You acted based on what was happening, but the fact is, protocol needs to be followed more carefully. Verifying identities is essential. Lisa then intervened, showing a security camera footage from the park that captured the incident. This footage shows the moment the confusion begins and how James approaches. We can see that amidst the chaos, there was a moment when identities were not properly verified. Edward watched the footage, noting how the situation had spiraled out of control and how James's actions were driven by urgency. This helps us understand the context, but the fact remains that the mistake happened. I agree, Lisa said. That's why we're taking steps to correct this. We'll implement a new identity verification protocol and ensure that all officers are aware of the changes. James, speaking sincerely, added, I know I made a mistake and I'm willing to learn from it. I want to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Edward looked at James with a gaze that mixed understanding and hope. The goal is not just to punish, but to learn and grow. Trust and transparency are crucial for us. Lisa, taking notes on the meeting's conclusions, then addressed everyone. Let's work together to prepare a press statement explaining what happened and the measures we're taking. We need to ensure the community knows we're committed to improvement and accountability. The meeting continued with discussions on the details of the statement and steps for implementing the new guidelines. Edward, Lisa, and James were dedicated to turning the incident into an opportunity for learning and improvement for the police force. After the meeting, Edward and Lisa walked out of the station. The atmosphere felt a bit lighter, though the emotional weight of the event was still evident. "Thank you for your help, Lisa," Edward said. "I believe we're on the right track to resolve this." "We're doing the best we can," Lisa replied with an encouraging smile. "Let's keep working to rebuild trust and make sure everyone learns from this." With a renewed sense of determination, Edward and Lisa prepared to face the upcoming challenges, confident that despite the difficulties, the incident could be an opportunity to reinforce integrity and trust in the Riverside Police Force. News of the incident involving Colonel Edward Johnson had spread through Riverside like wildfire. The headlines and local news were filled with reports and speculation. The pressure was high to provide a clear and transparent explanation to the community. It was a cloudy morning when Edward arrived at the station for another meeting with Lisa Carter. The mood was tense and charged, reflecting the seriousness of the situation. He carried a folder with documents and reports, while Lisa waited for him in the conference room. "Good morning, Colonel," Lisa said as she saw him enter. "We're ready to discuss the press statement and action plan." "Good morning, Lisa." "Yes, let's discuss it. I need to ensure that our message is clear and that people understand we're handling the situation as transparently as possible," Edward replied with determination in his voice. Lisa nodded and opened the folder with the draft of the statement. "Here's the draft of the statement. We want to be clear about what happened, acknowledge the mistake, and highlight the steps we're taking to prevent something like this from happening again." Edward began reading the statement, which detailed the incident and the station's commitment to reviewing and reinforcing policing procedures. He made a few notes and observations. "This statement is a good start, but we need to make sure the message not only informs but also reassures the community," Edward said, with a critical eye. "The mistake needs to be addressed in a way that shows our accountability and commitment to justice and transparency." Lisa agreed, adjusting the text according to Edward's suggestions. "Absolutely. Additionally, I think it's important for the community to see that we're taking steps to improve officer training." The meeting was interrupted when James Brown entered the room, looking apprehensive. "Can I speak with you, Colonel?" James asked, approaching Edward. Edward looked up, his expression a mix of fatigue and understanding. "Sure, James. Come in." James sat down, visibly uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize again, personally. I know what I did caused a big problem, and I want to explain what I was thinking at the time." "James, we've already discussed what happened. What's important now is that we resolve the situation and learn from it," Edward replied, keeping his tone calm. "I understand. What I want to say is that, at the time, I was so focused on controlling the situation that I didn't realize the mistake. The confusion was so intense, and I just wanted to do my job. I didn't know who was there, and I'm really sorry for that," James explained, his voice full of regret. Lisa intervened to help mediate the conversation. "James, your apology is important and shows that you're aware of the impact of your actions. The issue now is how we move forward and ensure this doesn't happen again." James nodded, his relief somewhat visible. "I want to be part of the solution. I'm willing to participate in additional training and help in any way needed." Edward looked at James with an understanding gaze. "The willingness to learn and improve is what matters now. Let's work together to ensure this becomes a learning point rather than a cause for division." Lisa continued, "We'll incorporate your suggestions on training and review our procedures. We also need to make sure the community is informed about what we're doing to prevent future mistakes." The conversation continued, with the team refining the statement and preparing for a press conference. Edward was determined to ensure the message was clear and effective. At the press conference, Edward, Lisa, and James stood together in front of a room full of journalists. Edward made the opening statement, addressing the incident with honesty and transparency. "I want to start by saying that what happened in the park was a mistake, and we take full responsibility for it. We are reviewing our procedures to ensure such mistakes do not happen again. Our commitment is to the safety and trust of the community we serve." Lisa supported the statement, highlighting the steps being taken to improve training and police procedures. We are implementing a new identity verification protocol and reinforcing our officers' training to handle similar situations with greater care. James also made a brief statement, expressing his remorse and willingness to improve. I deeply regret what happened and am committed to learning from this experience to better serve our community. The press conference was met with a mix of understanding and criticism, but the transparency and willingness to address the issue were well received. Edward knew that trust wouldn't be restored overnight, but they were taking important steps to move forward and reinforce their commitment to justice and transparency in Riverside. With the press conference done and the initial steps to address the incident underway, Riverside was in a state of anticipation. The public was waiting to see how the police would handle the aftermath of the mistake and if trust in the police force could be restored. Edward Johnson knew that recovery would be a gradual and challenging process. It was a Thursday afternoon when Edward decided to visit the Riverside Community Center, a place frequently visited by residents and where community voices were often heard. He wanted to hear directly from people and better understand how they were reacting to the incident. Edward entered the community center and was greeted by Marie Thompson, the center's director, a welcoming woman in her mid-50s. Colonel Johnson, it's nice to see you here. Can I offer you some coffee or anything else? Thank you, Marie. A coffee would be great, Edward replied, trying to keep his tone friendly despite the tension. As Marie prepared the coffee, Edward approached a group of residents discussing the incident. They were divided, with some expressing support for the police while others were skeptical about the effectiveness of the proposed changes. I can't believe something like this happened, commented Harold Peterson, a local resident in his 60s. My son works in the police, and he's always told me how crucial it is to verify identities before taking any action. This is simply unacceptable. Edward listened attentively, trying to understand the public's concerns. I understand your frustration, Harold. It was a mistake, and we're doing everything we can to fix it. We're reviewing our procedures and training our officers to prevent this from happening again. But will this actually change anything? Asked Karen Davis, a 40-year-old resident. We can't just hope that such a mistake won't happen again. What if another situation arises where the same thing occurs? Edward took a deep breath, aiming for a transparent response. We are committed to making meaningful changes. We've reviewed the protocol and are implementing new guidelines to ensure that all officers correctly verify identities. Additionally, we're providing additional training to handle similar situations more carefully. Marie brought Edward's coffee and joined the conversation. I believe listening to the community and being open to criticism is a crucial step toward restoring trust. We all need to work together to ensure that the police meet the community's expectations. Edward thanked Marie and continued talking with the residents, listening to their concerns and suggestions. The conversation was candid, and while not everyone was completely convinced, many appreciated Edward's willingness to address the situation directly. After the meeting, Edward met with Lisa Carter in her office. Lisa, the community's reactions were mixed. There is real concern about the effectiveness of the changes we're proposing. We need to make sure we're addressing these concerns effectively. Lisa agreed, with a focused look. I understand. We need to continue being transparent and ensure that we're not just making changes, but also showing results. We might consider holding regular community meetings to keep the dialogue open and track progress. That sounds like a good idea, Edward responded. We need to create channels for the community to express their concerns and for us to show how we're addressing those issues. As the day went on, Edward felt encouraged by the residents' willingness to engage and the honesty of their criticism. He knew that trust wouldn't be restored quickly, but open communication and concrete actions were essential steps toward recovery. The following week, a community meeting was scheduled to discuss the progress and the measures implemented by the police. Edward and Lisa were prepared to present their advancements and continue building trust with the Riverside community. The journey to restore trust was far from over, but the willingness to listen and improve was an important step forward. The Riverside Community Center auditorium was packed for the scheduled community meeting. The chairs were arranged in rows, and the main table was set with microphones and a screen for presentations. Edward Johnson and Lisa Carter were on stage, preparing for their presentation. The anticipation was high, and the residents seemed eager to hear the police's responses and plans. Lisa, standing beside Edward, reviewed her notes. "Everything is ready, Colonel. We'll start with the presentation of the progress we've made, and then open it up for questions." Edward nodded, his expression showing a mix of nervousness and determination. "Let's do our best to be clear and transparent. I hope this helps rebuild trust." As the meeting time approached, Marie Thompson took the stage to kick off the event. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Tonight, we have Colonel Edward Johnson and Detective Lisa Carter here to talk about the recent changes and answer your questions. Please give them a warm welcome." Muffled applause filled the room as Edward and Lisa took the stage. Edward picked up the microphone and began speaking. "Good evening, everyone," Edward said, trying to stay calm. "We're here today to discuss the recent incident and the measures we're taking to ensure that such mistakes do not happen again. We appreciate the opportunity to speak directly with you and hear your concerns." Lisa started the presentation on the projector, which displayed slides detailing the new protocols and the results of the internal reviews. "First, we'd like to present the changes we've implemented. We've established a new identity verification protocol to ensure that all officers properly check identities before taking any action. Additionally, we're providing extra training for all team members." The presentation was well received, but the real test was the question and answer session that followed. Edward and Lisa were ready to tackle the community's tough questions. One of the first to raise her hand was Karen Davis, who had previously expressed concerns. "I'd like to know how you plan to ensure that these new protocols are followed and don't become just a formality." Lisa responded confidently. "We're implementing an audit system to monitor compliance with the new protocols. We'll also have regular evaluations and ongoing feedback from both officers and the community to ensure that the changes are effective." Another resident, Harold Peterson, asked, "What about officer training? How will you ensure they truly understand and apply these new guidelines?" Edward replied, "The training will be comprehensive and ongoing. We're working with experts to develop a curriculum that covers both theory and practice. Additionally, we'll conduct simulations and assessments to ensure that all officers are prepared to apply the new guidelines correctly." As the meeting continued, the questions began to vary. Some residents expressed support and appreciated the police's efforts to improve, while others remained skeptical and wanted to see concrete results before fully trusting the changes. Edward and Lisa listened attentively and answered each question with honesty and clarity. Their willingness to face criticism head-on and provide detailed information helped create an environment of open dialogue. As the meeting wrapped up, Edward and Lisa addressed the audience. "Thank you all for coming and for your questions and comments. We will continue to work hard to ensure that trust between the police and the community is restored and strengthened," Edward said, closing the meeting. As the residents started to disperse, Edward and Lisa spoke with a few people, continuing to listen and understand the remaining concerns. Marie approached, offering words of encouragement. "You did a good job today, Colonel. People appreciated the transparency and your willingness to answer their questions." "Thank you, Marie. We believe that, over time, we can rebuild the community's trust," Edward replied with a tone of gratitude. Lisa agreed. "Yes, there's still a lot of work to do, but these meetings are an important step. Transparency and ongoing dialogue are crucial for rebuilding trust." The event marked an important milestone in Riverside Police's recovery process. Although there was still much to be done, the community meeting demonstrated a genuine commitment to change and a readiness to face challenges directly. Edward and Lisa were determined to move forward, working to turn the incident into an opportunity to strengthen the relationship between the police and the community. The morning after the community meeting brought a sense of relief, but also a foreboding of future challenges. Edward Johnson and Lisa Carter had made significant progress, but they knew there was still a long road ahead to restore community trust. However, something unexpected was about to come up. Edward was in his office reviewing documents when his phone rang. It was Lisa, her voice showing concern. "Colonel, did you see the news this morning?" "Not yet, Lisa. What happened?" Edward responded, his curiosity piqued. "You need to see this. The media has obtained footage that shows the incident in a different light. There's a new allegation of abuse of power," Lisa explained, her tone grave. Edward quickly turned on the television and tuned into the local news. The coverage focused on a new security camera recording that appeared to show a more intense and confrontational interaction than previously thought. The report suggested that, in addition to the confusion, more force had been used than necessary during the incident. "This is concerning," Edward commented as he watched the broadcast. "We need to understand the situation and prepare a response." Lisa arrived at Edward's office with a folder containing additional details. Fortunately, the investigation team has identified the source of the footage. It seems that it has been edited to create a more sensational narrative. "We need to be transparent about this as well. We can't let this situation escalate without a clear response," Edward said, with determination. Lisa nodded in agreement. "I agree. Let's prepare a statement explaining the situation and how we're handling the new allegation. We also need a press conference to clarify the facts and show that we're taking appropriate measures." By mid-afternoon, Edward and Lisa prepared for the press conference. The room was filled with journalists and cameras, all ready to hear the police's official response. Edward felt the pressure as he prepared to face another round of questions and speculations. Lisa started the conference with a brief summary of the situation. "Good afternoon, everyone. Recently, new information and an edited recording have raised additional concerns about the incident that occurred in the park. We want to clarify the facts and assure the community that we're handling the situation transparently and responsibly." Edward took the microphone, his voice firm and controlled. "As you know, the incident in the park was a mistake, and we take full responsibility. The new footage that has surfaced was edited to distort what actually happened. Our internal investigation is ongoing, and we are committed to correcting any mistakes and ensuring our procedures meet the highest standards." A journalist raised her hand and asked the question on many people's minds. "Colonel, how does the police plan to address the allegations of abuse of power? Is there any plan to review and, if necessary, discipline the officers involved?" Edward responded directly. "We are conducting a thorough internal review, and if any improper behavior is identified, we will take appropriate action. Our goal is to ensure that the police act with integrity and according to established ethical standards." Another journalist asked about measures to prevent future incidents. "How will the police ensure that this kind of situation does not happen again?" Lisa responded with details about the changes implemented. "As we mentioned before, we have reviewed and updated our identity verification protocols. Additionally, training will be more rigorous and include high-pressure situation simulations to better prepare our officers." The conference continued with a series of questions about the new measures and the impact of the incident on the community. Edward and Lisa answered with clarity, trying to defuse the situation and reassure the public that they were committed to resolving the issues. After the conference, Edward and Lisa met outside the press room, both exhausted. "That was tougher than we expected," Lisa commented, with a tone of relief mixed with fatigue. "Yes, but we need to stay strong," Edward replied with a concerned expression. "What worries me more is how these new allegations might affect the community's perception. We need to remain transparent and demonstrate our commitment to truth and justice." Lisa agreed. "We'll keep working hard to address these issues and make sure our efforts are visible to the community. It's important that they see we're doing everything we can to correct our mistakes and improve." As the sun set over Riverside, Edward and Lisa were aware that the journey to restore trust was far from over. With a new storm of allegations and challenges, their determination to handle the situation transparently and effectively was more crucial than ever. They knew that the battle for the community's trust would require not only concrete actions, but also constant and honest communication. The following week was marked by intense activity at the Riverside Police Department. Edward Johnson and Lisa Carter were involved in constant meetings, reviewing reports, and preparing the next phase of their action plan. The challenge now was to show the community that their efforts to resolve the crisis were not just empty words but concrete actions. One afternoon, Edward received a message from Mark Williams, an influential community member and local leader. Mark wanted to meet to discuss the police's recent actions and provide his feedback. Edward knew that gaining the support of respected figures in the community could help restore public trust. The meeting was set for the local cafe, a known gathering spot for informal discussions and community debates. Edward arrived early, finding Mark already waiting at a table by the window. "Colonel Johnson, good to see you," Mark greeted, rising to shake Edward's hand. "Thank you for coming. Shall we talk? Of course, Mark. I appreciate the chance to discuss this in person, Edward replied as he took a seat at the table. Mark leaned forward with a serious expression. I've been closely following what happened and the actions you've taken so far. I want to know more about how you're addressing the problem and if there's a real plan to ensure this doesn't happen again. Edward began to explain, aiming to be as transparent as possible. We are committed to correcting the mistakes that were made. We've revised our identity verification protocols and are implementing an intensive training program for all officers. We're also introducing an audit system to monitor compliance with these new guidelines. Mark listened attentively, nodding. That's a good start. But what concerns me is the actual implementation of these changes. How can the community be sure that these reforms won't be just temporary measures, but permanent changes? I understand your concern, Edward responded sincerely. We're planning regular community meetings to keep the public informed about our progress. Additionally, we'll be publishing periodic reports on the actions taken and the results achieved. Mark pondered for a moment and then asked, what about monitoring the abuse of power allegations? How will you ensure that officers who don't meet the new standards are held accountable? Edward answered directly. Any allegations of misconduct will be investigated thoroughly and independently. If any officer is found at fault, appropriate disciplinary measures will be taken, which could include additional training or other corrective actions. Mark seemed satisfied with the answers, but there was still a note of skepticism in his voice. I want to believe that you're doing what's right. The community needs to see real changes and that promises are being kept. Otherwise, trust will be hard to regain. Edward agreed. We're aware of that and will continue to work diligently to prove our commitment to change. Transparency and accountability are crucial to rebuilding trust. The cafe conversation continued on a more casual note, but Edward knew the meeting had been an important step. Gaining the support of Mark and other community leaders was crucial to showing that the police were genuinely committed to correcting their mistakes. Later, Edward and Lisa met to discuss the meeting with Mark. It was a good step forward, Lisa commented. It seems like Mark is willing to support the police as long as he sees concrete and ongoing actions. Yes, the approval of respected figures like Mark can help influence the community's perception, Edward agreed. We'll make sure to keep our promises and continue maintaining open dialogue. In the following days, Edward and Lisa worked on creating a detailed plan for periodic reports and new community meetings. The goal was to maintain transparency and provide regular updates on the progress and challenges faced. As Edward reflected on the progress made so far, he knew the road ahead was still long. But with each step taken, each meeting held, and each commitment fulfilled, they were building a path to restore trust and improve the relationship between the police and the Riverside community. Real and lasting change would require time, dedication, and the willingness to face challenges head-on. Edward and Lisa were ready to continue their journey, determined to overcome difficulties and make a positive difference in their community. The following weeks were marked by a busy pace at the Riverside Police Department. Edward Johnson and Lisa Carter were deeply immersed in the work of implementing the promised changes and addressing the new demands from the community. The pressure was high, but their determination to correct mistakes and restore trust kept the team focused. One of the first signs of progress was the launch of the new training program. Edward and Lisa were in a conference room with a group of officers who would participate in the sessions. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and a bit of tension, reflecting the importance of the changes. Good morning, everyone, Edward began, his voice firm and encouraging. We're here today to start a new chapter in how we conduct our work. The changes we're implementing are crucial to ensuring that we fulfill our duties in a fair and responsible manner. The specialized ethics trainer, Dr. Samuel Green, took the floor, his expertise evident in his approach. Today we'll start with a module on identity verification and the appropriate use of force. It's essential that all of you understand and apply these principles in your daily practices. As Dr. Green conducted the training, Edward and Lisa observed closely, taking notes and interacting with the officers to answer questions and clarify doubts. Later, Edward and Lisa were in their office discussing the initial feedback from the officers about the training. The comments have been quite positive so far, Lisa observed. It seems like the officers are beginning to understand the importance of the new guidelines. That's encouraging, Edward replied thoughtfully. But we still need to see how this translates into practice. We'll continue to monitor closely and ensure that the changes are being implemented correctly. That same week, Edward's team organized a community meeting to provide an update on the progress. The room was full, and many residents were present to hear the latest news. Lisa started the meeting with a brief presentation about the recent initiatives and the results achieved so far. Since our last meeting, we've implemented new verification protocols and enhanced officer training. We're working to ensure that everyone in the community feels their concerns are heard and addressed seriously. Edward added an update on the auditing and monitoring systems in place. We're conducting regular audits to ensure that our new procedures are being followed. We've also introduced an anonymous feedback system so that the community can report any issues without fear of retaliation. Among those present, Mark Williams stood up to ask a question. It's good to hear about the progress, but how are you handling the complaints and investigations into cases of abuse of power? People are still concerned about how these issues are being addressed. Edward responded firmly. Every complaint is being investigated independently and thoroughly. We're committed to ensuring that any inappropriate behavior is treated with the utmost seriousness. Transparency is crucial, and we will publish the results of these investigations whenever possible. The meeting was well received, but the real test of progress would come with time. Edward and Lisa were determined to continue working hard to demonstrate that the changes were not just words, but concrete and effective actions. At the end of the day, Edward and Lisa met for a quick review of the activities. Today was a positive step, Lisa commented with a tone of relief. There are still challenges ahead, but we are making progress. Yes, and it's important that we continue to keep communication open and transparent, Edward agreed. We're building a new foundation for our relationship with the community, and that requires ongoing effort. As the sun set over Riverside, Edward and Lisa reflected on the progress made and the challenges still to come. The path to restoring trust and improving police practices was long and required perseverance. But with each step taken and each action implemented, they were getting closer to their goal, creating a police force that served with integrity and responsibility. They were aware that the true achievement would not only be the implementation of changes, but also the building of a solid and trusting relationship with the community. With renewed commitment and a dedicated team, Edward and Lisa would continue their journey to turn challenges into lasting successes for Riverside. The changes implemented at the Riverside Police Department were beginning to show positive results. The community seemed more receptive to the police's actions, and the feedback from officers about the training was promising. However, a new challenge was about to test the effectiveness of the reforms and the resilience of Edward Johnson's team. It was a Tuesday morning when a serious incident occurred in Riverside. An emergency call reported an ongoing kidnapping in the city center. The initial information indicated that an individual had allegedly kidnapped a young person and was armed. The news quickly spread, and the case became the focus of local media. Edward was in his office reviewing reports when he received news of the incident. Lisa, we just got a call about a kidnapping in progress. The situation seems quite tense, Edward informed, his tone serious. Lisa immediately began preparing the team. We need to coordinate a swift and effective response. I'll gather the officers and initiate the negotiation protocol. Edward followed Lisa to the operations room, where the team was preparing for the crisis situation. We need to ensure that our action plan is in perfect compliance with the new procedures, Edward instructed, his voice full of determination. The safety of the young person and the peaceful resolution of this situation are our top priorities. Understood, Colonel. I'll make sure everyone is aware of the new guidelines and prepared to apply the training we've received, Lisa replied as she assigned tasks. The incident quickly attracted media attention, and reporters began to crowd around the scene. The pressure to resolve the situation safely and efficiently was high, and any mistake could reverse the recent progress. Edward and Lisa coordinated with the negotiation team, led by Detective Jack Reynolds, one of the most experienced officers in handling crisis situations. Jack was in direct contact with the kidnapper, trying to gather information and negotiate the release of the hostage. Jack, how's the negotiation going? Edward asked over the radio. We're making progress, Colonel, but the situation is tense. The kidnapper is demanding a sum of money and is behaving unpredictably, Jack replied, his voice calm despite the pressure. Continue with the negotiation and keep safety as the priority. Don't make concessions that could increase the risk to the hostage, Edward instructed. As the negotiation continued, the SWAT team prepared for a possible intervention. Lisa reviewed the action plans and checked that all officers were aligned with the new guidelines. Finally, after intense negotiation, Jack managed to persuade the kidnapper to release the hostage in exchange for a commitment to discuss his demands in a safe manner. The young person was freed and taken to a secure location with no serious injuries. Edward and Lisa met with Jack and the team to evaluate the outcome. Great job, Jack. The negotiation was handled exceptionally well. We need to review what we've learned from this situation and ensure that all lessons are incorporated into our future procedures, Edward said, relieved by the peaceful resolution of the incident. Jack nodded, still focused. Yes, Colonel. The situation was under control, but there's always room for improvement. I'll compile a detailed report so we can analyze our performance and identify any areas for improvement. Lisa approached Edward. The team's response was solid, but the incident highlighted the need to continue reinforcing training and communication between teams. We need to ensure that all procedures are up to date and that the team is always prepared to handle crisis situations. Edward agreed. Yes, and we also need to consider the impact on the community. Let's schedule a meeting to update the residents on the situation and how the police are handling it. By the end of the day, Edward and Lisa participated in a press conference to inform the community about the resolution of the incident and highlight the police's efforts to maintain safety. The media covered the statement attentively, and many residents expressed relief knowing the young person was safe. We want to assure the community that we're working tirelessly to ensure safety and handle crisis situations effectively, Edward told reporters. We appreciate everyone's patience and understanding as we work to resolve this incident. As the day came to a close, Edward and Lisa reflected on the trial they had just faced. They knew that, although the incident had been resolved successfully, it was just one of many future challenges. The journey to restore and strengthen community trust would continue, but the success in resolving the kidnapping was an important step in the right direction. Edward and Lisa's work was far from over, but the experience and determination showed that the Riverside Police Department was adapting and strengthening, one step at a time. The sun shone over Riverside, bringing a sense of renewal and hope to the city. The weeks following the resolution of the kidnapping had been marked by a continuous effort to consolidate changes and restore community trust. Edward Johnson and Lisa Carter were more focused than ever on ensuring that the Riverside Police Department became an example of integrity and efficiency. It was a Friday morning when Edward and Lisa received promising news. The city was preparing for an important community event, the annual summer festival that had drawn a large part of Riverside's population. The festival would offer an opportunity for the police to connect directly with residents and demonstrate the progress made since the park incident. Lisa was reviewing the event details with the community relations team. This festival is a great opportunity to show the community that we're committed to change and transparency, Lisa said as she organized the distribution of informational materials and planned interactive activities. Edward entered the room with a determined look. We need to ensure that our presence at the festival is meaningful. Let's set up a booth with information about the new protocols, conduct interactive demonstrations, and be available for conversations with residents. Absolutely, Colonel. We're also planning a short presentation on the progress we've made and the next steps, Lisa added. Additionally, we're organizing a Q&A session where the community can voice their concerns directly to us. As the festival approached, Edward and Lisa were in the city helping set up the police booth. The event was a resounding success, with colorful tints, food stalls, and an excited crowd. The police presence was well received, and many residents came forward to chat. Edward was at the booth, talking to a group of locals. We're very happy to be here today and have the chance to interact with all of you, Edward said with a sincere smile. We want to hear your feedback and answer any questions you might have about what we're doing to improve. A resident, Susan, asked a question about the new security measures. I've heard that you've introduced new protocols and training. How is this helping the community on a daily basis? Edward pointed to an informational leaflet. Yes, the new protocols include stricter verification procedures and ongoing training for all officers. This means we're better prepared to handle any situation effectively and fairly. We also have a feedback system where you can let us know about any concerns. Meanwhile, Lisa was conducting a crisis simulation demonstration with the help of a trained officer. A group of young people watched, interested in how the police handled complex situations. Here, we're showing how we apply the new procedures in a crisis simulation, Lisa explained. We want you to see how we're prepared to handle real situations and ensure everyone's safety. The event also featured a live presentation where Edward and Lisa spoke about the changes and progress made since the incident. The presentation was followed by a Q&A session where the community had the chance to ask questions directly to the police leaders. Mark Williams, present at the festival, made a statement during the session. I've been following the police's efforts to improve, and as someone involved in the community, I can say I'm impressed with the commitment shown. It's a positive and important step for our city. Edward thanked Mark and other community members for their support. We appreciate everyone's continued support and feedback. We're here to serve and protect, and your involvement is crucial to our success. The festival was a milestone for the Riverside Police Department. The positive interaction with the community, transparent demonstrations, and open conversations helped reinforce the image of the police as a force committed to change and improvement. As the festival drew to a close, Edward and Lisa met to reflect on the event. Today was a big success, Lisa said with a satisfied smile. The community responded well, and I think we managed to show that we're making a real effort. Yes, definitely, Edward agreed. Trust is being restored gradually, and events like this are vital to show that we're committed to ongoing change. The journey is far from over, but we're moving in the right direction. As night fell over Riverside, Edward and Lisa felt a sense of accomplishment. The summer festival had been more than an opportunity to interact with the community. It was a chance to reaffirm the police's commitment to integrity and transparency. The road to full trust was still long, but with each step taken, Edward and Lisa were building a solid foundation for a better future in Riverside.